So I wanted to make this next video about some of the things I've been working on around my home. About a year ago, we had some pipes burst in my house. We had a really cold day, got down to somewhere in the negative 20s, negative 23, I think it was. And it was windy, and the wind, I guess, got into some of the eaves in the home and froze some of the pipes. So around the house, that same pipe kept freezing because the water wasn't flowing through it, about 6 different breaks. So that leaked for quite some time. Fortunately, it happened when I was in Florida, so yay. So I came home to quite a mess. After fighting with the insurance company, took quite a bit of time to get the money out of them. They don't like to pay up when they're supposed to. They're quick to take your money, but they don't want to give it back to you when there's a need for it. So anyway, here we are today. 90% of the repairs have been done, including the basement. We had one of the basement walls actually collapsed because of the water damage. It filled up and just caved in on me. We've refinished all of the floors. I have a lot of hardwood floors in the home, which swelled up and cracked and all of that. So all of those have been redone. A lot of the carpet's been replaced. All the sheetrock, spackle, framing, insulation, all the things that needed to be replaced were replaced. The one thing that hasn't been finished is my kitchen. It's been taking me some time to get it done, but I'm plugging away at it little at a time. I'm trying to balance it with a lot of the other things I have going on. So the kitchen is almost done. I finally got the first of 2 countertops completed and installed, and I wanted to take you through a little bit of the process of how I did that. I'll spare you a lot of the more boring aspects like milling the material, some of the glue up, things like that. If you search YouTube, you could find adequate explanations of how to do all of that. But I will show you how I got everything straight and true after the glue up, how I got the miter to look as good as it does with a 2-foot deep countertop. That miter is over 30 inches long. So how I got that to be straight and clean, and a little bit of the finishing process as well, what I used and what I did to get the finish to look like it does. So enjoy the video. So as you can see here, I'm trying to flatten out a crown in the middle of the board. The piece has been all glued together. That was 2 separate pieces, about 12 inches wide. And the rough size has already been cut as well. After I get it planed flat, I'll start working on getting the 2 pieces fit together. So now that the board is flattened, I'm going back with some wood filler just to touch up where I had a little bit of grain tear out in a few spots. Now I'm using this Timbermate mahogany wood filler, and it works great as a pour filler. You can water it down. As it dries out, you can just add water to it, and it reconstitutes itself, and you can use it over and over, so it never goes bad. But I found that using it as a wood filler, the color match is not the greatest. Mahogany is pretty close to Sapele, but the Timbermate dries a little bit red, which I'm not too thrilled with. So what I'm doing is, before it dries, I'm going straight to sanding. And what I found that does is it blends a little bit of the sawdust in with the pour filler or wood filler, and it gets a closer color match, so that when you put the finish on, you're not going to notice that color variation between the filler and the substrate, which would be the wood in this case. So the color match is much better if you go straight to the sanding. Now I'm start off with an 80 grit, and then I'll work my way up through the grits. I'll go to a 120, then a 150, and finally a 220. And you want to stop there, because any more than that, you're kind of burnishing the wood, and it's going to make the finish not adhere as well, I've found. So stop at 220, and that'll give you a nice surface to apply your finish to. So now I'm laying out the 90-degree side of the countertop, and using that smaller square, the line didn't look quite straight to my eye, so I was worried that the sides might not be parallel from front to back of the countertop. So I grabbed this framing square, and the reason I did that is because you have one long leg. It's 2 foot. I could draw one solid line right across the countertop. So if you start on the front edge of the top and draw that line, and then flip the framing square to the back side of the countertop, you'll see any variations. If the line doesn't match up with the square when you flip it, you'll know that the sides are not quite parallel. In my case, they turned out to be parallel, but if not, you can always make any fine adjustments. It's better to make those adjustments before you cut than to cut it and regret it later. So here you see me starting to test fit these two pieces of countertop together. Even though I used a track saw, or if you're doing it yourself, maybe you use a track saw or a straight edge, there's always going to be some irregularities no matter what. Wood moves from the time you cut it to the time you put it together. There may be some variations in that miter, which happened with mine. So test fitting is important. Getting that miter nice and clean and that joint nice and tight is the difference between having a functional countertop and a beautiful countertop. So when you put this together, you'll see where there's pieces of material that need to come off. And by taking a block plane or a jack plane, you can take and work those pieces so that they fit nice and tight. And you'll see me doing that over and over again. I probably fit this together 4 or 5 different times before I got that miter nice and tight. And you'll probably have to do the same if you're building one of these yourself. So after working this miter a few times, you can see the joint is really nice and tight, but on that corner there you can see that they don't quite line up. And the reason for that again is wood movement. Now it's only about 1/8 of an inch, but we're going to have to do something with it. We're going to either have to plane that thickness out or try to adjust it when we're putting it together. So here I'm going to start the glue up process, and I just wanted to give everybody a word of caution. It's way better to have too much glue than it is to have not enough glue. And on a miter joint like this, you're talking about end grain, and we all know that doesn't glue together the greatest to begin with. So to have too much glue is not always a bad thing. So as you can see, I'm spreading this glue pretty liberally on here, and if it squeezes out, it squeezes out, but I want to make sure that all the pores on that end grain are filled so that I'm not going to have issues with this countertop joint in the future. All right, so you can see the glue up now. There's the two pieces of the countertop. And getting a 2 foot wide, so that would make that, I don't know, how long is that seam? It's about 3 feet, I think. Yeah, about 3 foot. So that's a 3 foot seam, about. On end grain, that's it's kind of tough, but it came out pretty good. So I used Craig screws to put that together because without some kind of monstrous jig, I don't know how you would clamp this. So the Craig screws just give that kind of like internal clamping. And it's on the bottom of the countertop. You'll never ever see it. So I know there's some people who are against that, the wood snobs. But whatever, it works. So there it is. So there's a little bit of a lip here on this piece. So I'm going to have to do some planing to get this flush. And then I'm going to sharpen the plane up real good. Take a few minutes and do that while the glue dries, and then I will plane that. So let me show you how it came out. So there's the seam. It's actually really, really tight. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now I planed it just to get the rough down. Because of the change in grain direction on this miter, I'm gonna have to sand it. Maybe you wouldn't if you had some kind of fancy plane, but I don't have anything. Like, my stuff is super cheap. So I'm gonna sand it. And once that's done, we'll get it cut to size exact. We'll go test fit it. And then I will do all the chamfering of the edges and stuff, make sure it's looks good. So I'm gonna sand it, I'll cut it to size, I'll test fit it, and then I'll show you the final chamfering on the edges. Okay, so pulled out the router and I ran a chamfer around this edge. Let's see if you can see it here. So it's just a basic chamfer around the edge of this countertop. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back and I'm going to sand and hand plane all of this with a little block plane, and I'm going to ease these corners and this bottom edge also. Probably just like one pass, one thinner pass with a block plane, just to take off that sharp edge, because that just, it leaves opportunity for something to catch it and splinter the wood out. So if you just ease that edge, ease these corners, that one, this one here, it will help prevent any damage, because these are going to take a little bit of abuse anyway, being countertops. So I'll break out that stuff, we'll clean it up, and then it's going to be time for finish. So it should be really pretty when it's all done. So I just wanted to show you guys what I'm going to be using to finish the top of this countertop. Now I already got one coat of it on the bottom side. With wood, being that it's basically alive and breathing, it's going to suck in moisture and out. You don't want to seal one side because the bottom side will breathe more and you might run into problems with cracking or things like that. So seal the bottom, seal the end grain, all of that stuff. Make sure it's nice and sealed. So I got one coat on the bottom, and this is what I'm using. I don't know if you can see this here. This crazy lid is on here, weird, but it's Waterlock's Original. It's a satin finish, and I did a little research online. So what does it say here? It says handmade from tung oil. It's got some solvents in it. So make sure you're using it in a ventilated area. But from my research online, um, it said that this was really great for countertop use. So I kind of looking forward to seeing how it works out. On the back here, it says forms a protective yet elastic finish against common household spills, moisture, and foot traffic, so it can even be used for flooring. It says penetrates and waterproofs when used as a finishing system in conjunction with original sealer and finish. So it's going to seal and do a real nice job. Again, this is a satin finish, so I'm going to start using this. As soon as this backside dries, I'm going to flip this over and get a nice coat on the top and see how it works. I'm going to probably do about 3 coats, sanding in between coats, and then I'll do a final steel wool polish on the top of it to get a nice even finish. So I'm sanding between coats with my random orbital sander. I'm using 220 grit between each coat, and then before the last coat I used 400 grit paper. I don't know if that's a benefit, but the finish did come out good. The final product was really nice. So the purpose of the sanding in between coats is to remove any high spots that you acquire when applying the finish, and also to help any subsequent coats that you apply to bond to the previous one. Now this water locks, one of the benefits of it, as far as I've read online, is that it's easy to repair. And in applying the coats of finish, I would say that that's probably pretty true. After you make a little bit of do a little bit of sanding, the finish goes on really nice and clean. So I would imagine if you damage the countertop in the future, maybe put a knife into it or maybe a burn mark or some scratches, it would be very easy to just sand those scratches out and then apply another coat of finish to bring the countertop back to its original shine and original look. So here you can see the finished product. It came out really, really nice. This is after 5 coats of water locks. It looks great even under the fluorescent lights of my shop. So it's really going to look good installed. And I hope this video was informative. I encourage you to try to build your own countertops, no matter what material you're going to build it out of. It's a really nice learning experience, and you'll be proud every time you walk in your kitchen.